We begin Fox Report on this Sunday with details about a vicious killer who blew up a wedding. He was likely just 12 to 14 years old. That's according to the president of Turkey, our ally, who is asking for our help now. Turkish authorities are blaming the Islamic State savages for the bloodshed. And if that terrorist were in fact a young boy or teenager, it is a horrific reminder of the kind of reach that the ISIS savages have. And the United States is sending our Vice President Joe Biden to that country tomorrow to talk terrorism. As the questions loom at this hour, is Turkey turning into a new front in the war against the Islamic State? Here's what we know. At least 51 people are dead, more than 100 injured. That's quite a chunk of the wedding party number, so we understand. Funerals quick to come already, with some of the victims being laid to rest. The White House is calling it a barbaric and cowardly act. It happened in a city along the Syrian border, pretty much an open door to that nation where a civil war rages on. Connor Powell is live in our Middle East Bureau with more. Connor?
Yeah, Harris, this battle in between the ISIS fighters that have come in and out of Turkey and the Turkish government continues. We've seen really for about 6 or 9 months now of ISIS attacks across all of Turkey. The target of this latest attack appears to have been this Kurdish wedding. At least 51 people were killed when a young ISIS fighter between the ages of 12 and 14, according to Turkish officials, wearing a suicide vest, went into this into this Kurdish wedding, blew himself up. 51 people dead, more than 90 injured. Now, Turkey has been battling Kurdish separatists for a long time, but ISIS appearing to pick this Kurdish wedding as a way of trying to sow more sort of ethnic and sectarian strife between not only Kurds and the Turks. It all lends to this sort of chaotic feeling in Turkey right now, where you have a government that is battling Kurdish separatists, but ISIS is also battling and fighting the Turkish government. It's a situation that is growing increasingly chaotic there, with several different groups seemingly all fighting each other.
Well, Connor, not to wade too much into the politics that would be going on for Turkey right now, but we can't miss this news that's being made, and that is that our ally in NATO is also doing some talks right now with Russia. Is there any situation looming right now that Turkey would leave NATO?
There's no situation where, according to U.S. officials and also in NATO, that Turkey is anywhere close to leaving NATO, but they have begun to hedge their bets to some extent. They've always been on the sort of periphery of NATO to some extent, not being part of the EU, not being sort of a Western democratic country. They've always been sort of there, and that's part of the reason why Turkey has been so important to NATO, is it was a bridge outside of just Western Europe. But you do see talks between the Turkish government, which is increasingly growing hostile to not only the United States but other NATO countries. President Erdogan is very unhappy after the coup attempt that the United States has not tried to extradite the leader of what the government in Turkey says was Fethullah Gulen. He's an Islamic cleric that lives in Pennsylvania. Erdogan blames him for launching this coup, and he wants to see the United States try to extradite him to Turkey. That apparently is not going to happen. And so Erdogan is starting to look around into other allies, but keep in mind that there are deep, deep ties between Turkey and NATO. Turkey has been a longtime NATO member, but they certainly are trying to scare U.S. and other NATO countries into thinking that maybe, just maybe, they would look towards Russia and leave NATO.
Yeah, so much undoubtedly that will be on the bill tomorrow as Vice President Joe Biden heads in that direction to talk terrorism. You talk about the extradition of that man who's here in the United States and what's gone on in Turkey. It will be interesting to see how the news unfolds with regard to that. Connor, thank you very much. Let's do presidential politics now. Hillary Clinton took time off from the campaign rally stump, instead raising money in Massachusetts today. Donald Trump reportedly is preparing for the upcoming general election debates, the first one just about 5 weeks away. After naming a new campaign manager last week, RNC Chairman Reince Priebus now says he thinks Donald Trump is on the right track.
I think that keep doing what he's been doing over the last 10 days, which is, I think he's shown maturity. I think that he's growing in his role. He's a person who's never run for public office. This election is about choices. You have someone who is not politically correct, who at times has said some harsh things, even he admitted, versus someone who lies with incredible skill and grace.
Kristen Fisher is live in D.C. for us. And so, first of all, the RNC chair says Trump is on the right track. What's his new campaign manager saying at this point?
Harris, today Kellyanne Conway made her first Sunday show appearances since becoming Trump's campaign manager. And despite Trump trailing in the polls, she gave a very rosy picture of the state of his campaign.
This was the best week, I think, so far in the Trump campaign, mostly because he's able to be himself, the authentic Donald Trump, but also the pivot that he's made is on substance, George. He's out there talking about law enforcement. He's talking about defeating radical Islamic terrorism.
Now, there's another possible pivot that people are talking about, and that involves Trump's immigration plan. You know, for months he's been talking about creating a deportation force to remove the 11 million undocumented immigrants that are living in the United States. Well, today we learned that support for that plan is not set in stone. In fact, Harris, the words that Conway used are to be determined. Harris?
Yeah, TBD. Kristen, I understand that the Clinton campaign has just announced some big fundraising numbers.
Yeah, they have. The Clinton campaign won't confirm it, though, but the Associated Press is reporting that Clinton's finance director told staffers that they're halfway to their goal of raising $1 billion. Over the weekend, Clinton attended fundraisers on Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, and Cape Cod, and they have about 40 more fundraising events planned in 14 states over the next 2 weeks. But despite her fundraising strength, Clinton is facing renewed vulnerabilities on two familiar fronts, her emails and her family's foundation. Well, today, Clinton's campaign manager, Robbie Mook, defended the Clinton Foundation by pointing fingers at the Bush Foundation.
You didn't hear questions about the Bush Foundation when the second Bush president came into office. His family continued to serve on the board there. President Clinton has said he'll step down from the Clinton Foundation board.
Former President Bill Clinton also said that his foundation will stop accepting foreign donations if his wife wins the White House, though some loopholes may already be emerging in that self-imposed ban. Harris.
Well, for some people wondering, why wouldn't you confirm $500 million in fundraising? It's been my experience that sometimes campaigns like to start off a fresh Monday week with that kind of information. We'll see what happens. Good to see you. Thank you.
Thanks, Harris.
A point of suffering in America right now as Louisiana faces the harsh realities of epic flooding. The water is receding. The death toll is now at least 13 people. Authorities are still assessing the wide destruction. Some 60,000 homes are damaged. More than 100,000 people have registered for federal assistance. Brian Yennis is here with more. And Brian, the latest on the recovery efforts. Prayers the world over, but this is tough.
It is tough, a long road ahead, and people are leaving their shelters and arriving to see their homes for the first time in an all too emotional moment. Some 60,000 homes damaged in this historic flood, as you said, a 1-in-1,000-year event in southern Louisiana. Water leaving behind mud and mold, soaked furniture, carpets, and lost photos. Over 100,000 people have applied for federal assistance, and Governor John Bel Edwards says the storm hasn't gotten the attention it deserves nationally, and they need more help.
This is a historic, unprecedented flood event, and because it wasn't a hurricane or a tropical storm, this rain event didn't have a name, we have folks around the country that I think are just now realizing how significant it was, and so we really need help. Typically by this point in a storm, I think Red Cross would be receiving a lot more donations.
Search teams are going door to door looking for signs of life. Those homes that look suspiciously quiet during this cleanup time could be places where victims have been trapped, dead or alive. Horrifically, floodwaters have caused coffins to become unearthed in at least 15 cemeteries across 7 parishes, according to the Louisiana Department of Health. Caskets floating, and now some families have to rebury relatives. No word yet on how many tomb sites have been damaged. Church groups, the Red Cross, residents and family members, though, of the victims are all chipping in to clean up. The local Farm Bureau is offering meals to workers and victims. Some 3,200 people are now in shelters. That's down from a high of 11,000.
We take for granted that we can go out and have lunch, we can have dinner, and these people basically have nothing. They don't have food, they don't have water, there's nothing. So this is minute compared to what they're experiencing.
Louisiana isn't alone. Texas getting some flooding as well in the San Antonio area, particularly in Floresville, where some 30 to 40 people have had to be rescued from rising water as a flood watch just ending there.
You know, those of us who live on the East Coast have learned a saying out here since Sandy, and that is that even though it may not have been an event like a hurricane, when the flooding comes, the water remembers. It remembers those new inroads that it made with the last disaster, and it can be extremely debilitating and frightening. So people are wondering how they can help.
That's right. There are many ways you can help. This is the worst U.S. natural disaster since Hurricane Sandy 4 years ago. People can donate at redcross.org/donate, at SamaritansPurse.org, or to the Baton Rouge Area Foundation at BRAF.org. Those are just some ways to donate.
You and I follow each other on social media later tonight. Let's get that going.
No
All right.
doubt.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too,
Thank you. The White House says the president's plan to travel to Louisiana holds for Tuesday. And police call it the most horrific scene that they have ever witnessed in one area. 5 people dead, one of them pregnant. Now, new details on the suspected killer. Stay close.
Families desperate for help after the flood. Where are our leaders when the people need them? Sean is live in Baton Rouge, hearing firsthand from victims. Monday on a special Hannity.
President Obama is expected to arrive at the White House this hour after a 2-week summer vacation with his family on Martha's Vineyard. While he may quiet some of the criticism for not cutting short that vacation to go to flood-ravaged Louisiana, the president has a full plate waiting for him in D.C. as he moves into the final months of his presidency. Here's White House correspondent Kevin Cork.
Harris, good evening from Martha's Vineyard. You know, optics really do matter in politics, and especially so when the president, for example, is on vacation. And while it is true the administration did send the director of FEMA and the secretary of Homeland Security to Louisiana to sort of manage the recovery process, sometimes the president simply has to step up and be counted, and that, of course, will finally happen on Tuesday as the president makes his way down to the Bayou State. He'll see firsthand how the recovery effort is going, and he'll learn a great deal about how the people of Louisiana really come together in the midst of tragedy. But even as the president puts down his golf clubs and picks up the spirits of the people of Louisiana, he will continue to face a great deal of criticism by many who believe he should have been there already. And just a sample of that, let me share an editorial from The Advocate. That's the big newspaper in Baton Rouge. It reads in part, "The optics of Obama golfing while Louisiana residents languished in floodwaters was striking. It evoked the president of the passive federal response to the state's agony in 2005, a reference to Hurricane Katrina, a chapter of history no one should ever repeat." But it is also important to point out that the governor of the state of Louisiana did tell the White House that it didn't really want the president to come there too soon because his presence might interfere with the recovery process.
I didn't want to divert these police officers, sheriff's deputies, and state troopers and other essential resources and assets to providing security for the president while they were needed in this region.
Harris, of course, we will be there Tuesday when the president makes his way to the Bayou to survey again the recovery and the rebuilding process. But I should also point out, and I think this is important, as wet weather is expected to continue to move into the area, the long road to recovery could be even longer. Harris?
Yeah, we've been talking about that. Thank you very much, Kevin. Tonight, after the Fox Report, a programming note. Don't miss a brand new Waters World with my friend Jesse. It's a special, and here's a preview.
Tell me what you think the president's legacy will be.
His legacy is going to be change, you know.
I think he's probably going to go down as one of the great presidents that this country's ever had.
Are you on drugs?
I am not on drugs, but I am on Fox.
He's saved the auto industry. He's introduced health care.
Didn't he say health care prices were going to go down, but now they've gone up?
Well, I don't know whether he said that. You're saying that.
Waters World airs tonight, right after the Fox Report, 8 p.m. Eastern, again at 11 and 2 a.m., only on Fox News. Police in Mississippi say a man turned himself in for murders. Yes, plural. They happened in Alabama. That's where the bodies of the victims were found, one of them a pregnant woman. Local law enforcement there say they've never seen anything like it.
Very, very gruesome scene. It's awful.
20-year career as a prosecutor, and I've never seen a scene where there were 5 people that were brutally and viciously murdered.
That man is now charged with 6 counts of capital murder. We're told he had an extensive criminal history, and police say they believe he knew those victims. Officials in Florida are dealing with some headwind as they try to fight the Zika virus. The CDC has confirmed the number of cases is ticking up, particularly in South Beach, Miami. People were out at the beaches this weekend anyway. They say the virus, though, isn't going away anytime soon. Also, this, deadly wildfires in California, also not going away anytime soon. How people in that area are handling the devastation. Stay with us. New concerns over Zika in America. A government health official is warning the mosquito-borne disease could hang around here for a year or two. Florida authorities announced 5 new cases of Zika in Miami Beach. They say the new area of transmission covers about 1.5 miles of the trendy tourist packed area. The mayor is looking to ease fears.
The CD said specifically, only pregnant women who don't have essential travel to these 20 square blocks should consider not going. I was out on Ocean Drive today and it's absolutely packed. I mean, the beach is packed. There's people in bikinis and bathing suits and skateboarders that are almost wearing nothing. And, you know, we're letting them know that they should probably wear repellent.
Wow. Florida Governor Rick Scott is asking the CDC for additional testing and prevention kits. He also directed state officials to offer businesses mosquito spraying at no cost. The fires in California are forcing a famous tourist site to close for business. The Hearst Castle in the central part of the state shut down today as a fire that leveled more than 100 homes moved too close for safety. Crews are gaining ground on some of the fires out west, but others are not even close to being contained. Will Carr reports from Los Angeles.
Good evening, Harris. There are more than a dozen wildfires burning across the western United States this weekend. That includes the Cedar Fire, which continues to burn to the northwest of Bakersfield. So far, the containment numbers are low as the fires force 1,500 residents to evacuate the area, and it continues to threaten almost 800 homes. Other residents say they're ready to leave quickly if they have to.
My car's packed, my animals are in my car, and we live, we're just real close to the main road.
To the south, the Blue Cut Fire continues to burn 60 miles east of Los Angeles. Fire crews there, though, making great progress. The fire is now 83% contained after burning 37,000 acres. And residents say they're thankful for all the hard work the crews on the ground have put in.
I think this whole valley would have gone up had they not put up a battle right here and stopped the fire. Because you can see the hot spots where it just jumped and it skipped, and it could have been a lot worse than it was.
The Blue Cut Fires burned more than 100 homes, and many residents are getting their first look at the destruction this weekend. Many of the wildfires burning across the western United States are being fueled by drought conditions. You have to remember California is still in the middle of a 5-year historic drought. So far, we've had more fires this year than the point last year, which is a bad sign because last year was the most expensive wildfire season on record. Harris.
Will, thank you. We are learning new details now about the death of pop icon Prince. According to the Associated Press, an official close to the investigation says several pills recovered from his home were counterfeit, incorrectly labeled drugs containing fentanyl. That's a synthetic opioid, 50 times more powerful than heroin. Prince died at his Paisley Park estate in Minnesota in April. The official cause of death was an accidental fentanyl overdose. Authorities are still investigating how he got the drug. The Fox News political insiders are coming up next right here on Home Base. Donald Trump shaking up his campaign again with the hopes of shaking up the polls as well. But what will his new message be, and is it too late to change voters' minds? We'll talk about it all. And we'll dive into the third-party effect. How will they affect tight races in battleground states? Yeah, they are tightening up. The people that are really the insiders in this whole thing. Plus some evidence that their support is growing with voters, those people who are not Democrat or Republican in the race. Facebook. We're coming right back. We're going to talk politics. Stay with us. Oh, it's heating up. We're entering the second half of August, peak fundraising time for both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. Politico, the website, now reporting some big numbers, which seem to show just how different the campaign strategies are. Hillary Clinton's campaign reportedly spent $2.9 million in July on its roughly 700-person staff and nearly $26 million more on advertising. In comparison, again, this is according to Politico, the Trump campaign reportedly spent $400,000 on a staff of 84. And Politico is reporting that the Trump campaign spent more than 4 times as much on merchandise and hats for those huge crowds that he sees. Let's bring in our Fox News political insiders from Charleston, South Carolina via satellite tonight. But warm and cozy up close in our hearts is Pat Caddell, a former pollster for President Jimmy Carter and Fox News contributor. John LeBoutelier, former Republican congressman for New York, and Doug Schoen, former pollster for President Bill Clinton and a Fox News contributor as well. John, I'm going to start with you and the spending. Donald Trump arguably is leaving his mark every place he goes. And some say that could be real strategy in terms of leaving something tangible.
Well, his strategy all for the last year was, I can get everything I need in free media. And
he gets a lot.
He gets a lot, but it's not enough. And he's behind in virtually every poll in every state, right? And we used to wonder this year, will TV ads, traditional TV ads, have any impact? They didn't in the primaries in the Republican race. But in the general, Hillary has applied heavy money. Now, you put up her campaign, but her PAC is spending 5 times more in the 10 or 11 battleground states.
And so, buying ads here in New York, which is not even a battleground state, but it's where
not
Trump
in
lives.
New York. No, they're buying it on national cable.
Yeah.
They're on national cable, but they're everywhere. And so she's doing that. He's not. Now, whoever would have thought Donald Trump? I say to you, Donald Trump, you right away, the first thing you think is really rich. That the richest guy ever to run for president would not be financing this campaign. He should have written out a check for $500 million to his campaign and not worried about money, and then spent all his time running against Hillary. And he didn't do it.
So the argument, Doug, there is that he didn't have to previous to this. But I want to get to a viewer question. Randy writes, if Trump's pivot, as some people see it, is successful, when will it show up in the polls? You're a pollster.
Well, first, there has been some tightening in the national numbers this week. There was one poll out today, had him a couple of points ahead. It's been somewhat of an outlier, but there's a slight...
Rasmussen shows him, shows them tightening too.
There is a but, and I need to underscore that. In the swing states that John alluded to, where Hillary Clinton's advertising heavily both on her own and through her super PAC, Hillary is ahead in virtually every swing state. She's close to 350 electoral votes when you add in leaners, well over the 270 she needs. This is an election, Harris, as we all know, that is decided in the Electoral College. You can't be outspent, as Donald Trump has been, like 100 million to 1 million or no million, and hope to win the election.
Pat, I want to talk with you a little bit just, though, about pure strategy in terms of the campaign. So you've got some people now with Donald Trump's campaign that arguably are, Kellyanne Conway is getting cheers from both sides of the political aisle for being one of the best at what she does. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think they've made change in the campaign, but I think the most important change has been with Donald Trump this week. He finally had a week with several speeches. It got somewhat overshadowed a little bit by the news about the campaign staff. But he had really Monday and Tuesday, 2 speeches, one on foreign policy, one on safety, and he began to make his populist theme. He spoke again late in the week where he, for the first time, said he regretted things, began to have a message. Many people thought that speech, at least I read online, even Politico, which is the Hillary Clinton base in Washington with the Washington Post, said, after 107 days, well, he finally does it. He finally gives the right speech. Look, being on message and having message is far more important than any of the other changes that you could have in the campaign.
All right. I want to talk a little bit now about just how the money's being spent. I know you're saying where the money's not coming from. But, if you're going to spend $400,000 on 84 people, she's got 703. You've run campaigns, John. You've won campaigns, John. You've been a senator. What does it take to win?
No, I was not a senator. I was a congressman.
You were a congressman.
Right.
I'm sorry.
But he does know politics.
Yes, he does. And, if Harris Faulkner chooses to give you a bump up, I guess we've got to live with that.
If we're coming from you, it's an honor. I'll say that.
So you've won.
Okay.
So what does it take? When you look at the gap of the number of people, does it matter all that much?
Let me tell you something. When you're a candidate, your name is on the ballot, you're going for this very special job of being an elected official. You should want everything going in your favor. So you want commercials. You want the best field staff you could have. I had the best pollster in both of my campaigns. One, Douglas E. Schoen, was my pollster. I had
but
the
he's
best.
a Democrat. How did that work out?
Because we're
friends.
Okay.
But seriously, you want
school
everything.
ties are deeper.
They are.
Okay.
But no, and Pat knows this. A good campaign is all of it put together, you know. And Donald early on thought the candidate is everything. I don't need any of that other stuff. It's a different year. I don't need it. He's been brought down the learning curve in the last 2 months by all these bad polls, and he's been slapped upside the head, and he's woken up. And Kellyanne now is trying to catch the campaign up to have a decent field staff to get out the vote. They're way behind on
Well,
this.
some gifts along the way, though, and I know how well you know the Clintons, Doug. Gifts along the way with the email scandal with Hillary Clinton, which is heating up again. I mean, it's almost mid-August at this point. It is mid-August.
And look, let me be very, very candid tonight, as I try always to be. The Clintons understand that their position is a necessarily perilous one. And what I mean by that is as the polls tighten, they know that there is a large block of America that will not vote for Secretary Clinton. They know that they need to spend $1 billion herself, $1 billion with the super PACs, a total of $2 billion to try to do everything they can to win. John is right. Unless Donald Trump gets out there through the good offices of my dear friend Kellyanne Conway, who was a first-class operative, and try to match them at least in some of these swing states going forward, it's going to be tough for Donald Trump.
Well, look. Let me say something first of all about the polls because it's important. You know, this reminds me, as I listen to the mainstream media, and even on Fox today, with a lot of people who claim to be political strategists who've never been in a presidential campaign. And a lot of people seem to think that politics only started in 2008. I just want to remind people that in 1940, let me just make 2 quick points. 1948, the pollsters, Gallup and the others,
that was your first campaign, right, Pat?
Pretty close. I was 2 years from being born. But anyway, they stopped polling because their experience when they first started polling was with Roosevelt. By Labor Day, the race was settled. There was no reason. It was a different election. They're acting like this election's over as opposed to being potentially the most volatile election we have seen. Number 2, at this point in this week in 1968, Hubert Humphrey came out of a Democratic convention that was a disaster. 44 to 29 down against Richard Nixon. 15 points as a sitting vice president and came within a hair of winning. These are different elections, and we have more volatility. And let me just say one thing. Yes, they have to compete, but the advertising doesn't. The bad advertising is not working. It's efficiency. Good advertising will work, and it's got to match message. But so far, this is going to be decided. Is this election about Donald Trump, or is it about the country and the political class and the revolt? And if it is, he wins. And that's the question. Can he do that?
We'll talk more about what happens if also there are 2 other parties that could jump into this thing, at least become sticky wickets along the way. We'll talk about that and see how that maybe changes the poll numbers. A hint, it brings Donald Trump closer to Hillary Clinton. It starts to close that gap when Gary Johnson and Jill Stein get in. We're going to talk about it next. Stay close.
Trump Town Hall Special 2-night event. Inside the immigration crisis. Tuesday, victims share their first-hand horror stories. Then Wednesday, officers sound off on securing the border. Plus, the candidate's full immigration plan. Hannity hosts this Trump Town Hall exclusive.
The Fox News political insiders are back, and I do want to talk about the independents and how they factor in all this, but I want to get to a little social media first, so let's do that. FAC writes, does Trump risk losing his core enthusiastic audience if he pivots too much? And this one for you, Doug.
Sure.
Michael P. Mulhall says, Harris, how do the insiders view Trump's visit to the flood-affected areas of Louisiana? My question was, is President Obama going because Trump went first?
Yes, of course. Look, President Obama is mindful of the fact that Katrina hurt President George W. Bush very badly. When Trump went, I guess it was Friday, if I remember correctly, and said President Obama needs to go, what he was doing was throwing down the mantle at the same time, saying very clearly, I understand, I'm compassionate, I'm concerned. It was the right move for Trump, but it puts the onus on Obama, who desperately wants Hillary to be elected, to show up himself.
So why doesn't anybody raise the question, why doesn't Hillary go into Louisiana?
She put out a statement that she had called the governor of Louisiana, the Democrat governor of Louisiana, who we might have expected to get a call from her because we know he'd been talking with the president. But you ask a question. I don't know the answer to that.
Well, this is the point, is the campaign has to
fundraising, John.
And I haven't seen reporting to answer that question.
But Doug, every news story focuses on Trump. Trump going to Louisiana.
Right.
And if I'm Hillary, that's okay. I'll let him have a couple good days as long as most of the days are negative. And it's always about Trump.
Right.
Go ahead, Pat.
I don't mind it always if you're Trump being about him if he's making the right case. His going to Louisiana was a smart move. It showed for what him is important that he cares about people, and that's been a problem in some of the polling. Hillary not going, I think, is a problem. Obama on the golf course, the hypocrite in chief. On the golf course, just like he was when Americans were being beheaded in the Middle East. He's more addicted to the golf course than he is to his country or his job. And he didn't go until he was embarrassed to go. And that is a shame because when his absence and her absence tells you about people who think they don't have to worry about what voters think.
Well, also, Obama's not running again, and Hillary's not going to win Louisiana.
But he is running. She is running as his third term. And she is openly running as his third term.
But she's not going to win Louisiana.
So when he screws up, she gets to have it.
Harris, look, what we really need to go back to and focus on is the fact that the Electoral College, which is determined by 11 states, is strongly in the... Pat, let me please finish.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I appreciate your...
You guys are so nice now that I'm back from vacation.
Exactly. But here's what's going on inside Clinton world. They're saying, look, we recognize we're in a tough position. As long as we get the $2 billion and flood advertising with negatives on Donald Trump, they will, in their terms, do everything possible to negate the pivot that Pat and John were speaking of that Donald Trump's now doing, because they know that if Hillary Clinton becomes the issue and the central focus, she could well lose, despite the fact she's got a comfortable lead now.
I keep thinking she should go to Fiji for 3 months. Just go away.
Oh, God, John, you couldn't be more wrong, I believe.
Okay,
let me just
make
say
my
that
point.
maybe she should.
I guess
no, she should hide. I think you're right, she should hide, because she's not a factor in the election. But I wouldn't go to Fiji. But
she's going to fundraisers.
You and Doug are going to lose your cards from the Democrat Party.
Exactly.
Do they still pass those out?
The bundlers.
They're taking mine away.
Fly in.
Dave Wolverton writes on Twitter.
Can I make a point?
Hold on one second. Dave Wolverton writes on Twitter, Trump needs to focus on the economy. Clinton will try to get him off his message, but it's the economy, stupid. So these are supporters, I would imagine, some of them on my Twitter feed who are chiming in about him, because that sounds like a supportive thing to do. That's some interesting advice. I thought he was back on message. Why are people so fearful that he's not going to stay on it? He's done four speeches on message.
Yeah, well, there's a little lag. You know, some of these articles get written in comments, and the campaign has changed again. So now we're into the second week of the new administration
and you
of the
say
Trump
this counts.
campaign. Oh, yeah, and let us see if he sticks with it, which I think he will, by the way. We go for a few weeks, and then comes the next huge way station in this campaign, which is that first debate on the 26th of September. This is the thing that's going to really change the campaign.
Okay, hang tight as we head into a commercial. Wendy Barraza writes on Twitter, Hillary Clinton is spending $2 billion to buy the presidency. It's disgusting while there are people living in poverty in the United States. It's interesting because you hear the comments about Donald Trump not spending any. You wonder if he maybe wins some bonus points because people see him as being more like them.
Not one.
All right, we'll be right back. Apparently, Libertarian Gary Johnson and Green Party candidate Jill Stein are doing more than just talking to each other and talking to the media. They've been talking to a lot of voters. And that's that third-party presence that's starting to kind of creep into an interesting zone during this election. Let's take a look. Colorado. I thought the state, this is Quinnipiac, looked if it were just Trump against Hillary Clinton. See where they are? They're fairly close, right?
10
double
points
digit.
is not close.
Right, double digit. Look at what happens when Stein and Johnson get into the race. Now, there were a few of these polls last week. Now we're starting to see more. Look at how tight it gets. 23% of the vote would go to third party.
Let me speak to that, because the Commission on Presidential
These are battleground states, by the way.
Debates has decided that candidates need to hit 15% to get into the debates, which to me is a very, very bad decision for our democracy, given, as Pat and John and I have said, an increasingly large percentage of the electorate does not want Trump or Hillary. Johnson in that poll was at 16. Nationally, he's been high single digits or about 10. The fact that we are going to exclude them from the race when both of them have distinctive messages, voices to be heard, and reflect, I think, the public's desire for more, not less, candidates to be included is a bad decision and potentially could skew the results.
Pat, let's hear from Pat. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'd just like to jump in on a couple of quick things on that. One is, this is a sign of how volatile it is. And as we all know, the debate commission is rigged by the two parties with a single purpose of making sure that the American people have only the options of voting Democrat and Republican. It is a scandal beyond belief. Beyond that, the reason they have such diverse support is that many people are not sure where they are, and it shows the volatility. And the last quick point I'd like to make to what Doug said in the last segment is this. I was listening to him. I thought I was listening to the French general staff in 1940 as they explained the French, who had more tanks, more guns, more planes, and more troops than Germans, about how trench warfare still worked, while the Germans were using blitzkrieg. And that is a difference in this election.
So you were in both the Truman campaign and the Second World War, Pat. Is that correct?
Can I bring up a campaign that Pat wasn't?
Just trying to educate the audience, guys.
If you put the poll up of Colorado with the four-way race again, to speak to a campaign that Pat was in, this thing, it was, what is it? Can you put it up? Hillary was at 43, Trump was at 35 or something. It's almost a mirror image. Here we go. No, that's the one-way. Now the four-way.
Yeah, they're
put
getting
that one up.
They scroll in order. There
Hillary
you go.
41, Trump 33, 16. Now this is almost a mirror image of 1992, when Bill Clinton got 43%. George H.W. Bush, the sitting president, got 37%, and Ross Perot got 19%. That's almost, those within a couple of points, the same thing.
There's one more. I want to take a look at Iowa, because, I mean, these are the states that, and you had made the comment, Doug, that she stopped spending in some of these states, Hillary Clinton. But look at how tight this is in Iowa. And then add the other candidates, the third-party candidates.
Look,
I think it's interesting. I mean, for them to still, and it's a little bit less that Johnson and Stein get here, but it's still 15%.
Sure. And let me make a point. We don't really know at this point what the net impact of Stein and Johnson will be. It looks like it's costing Hillary about 1%.
Well, it's another woman on the ticket.
Well, that's right. And Johnson has been getting, despite the fact that he's the libertarian, he's been getting slightly more from Hillary than from Trump. But in a race like this, with, as John says, a large percentage of the vote up for grabs, the volatility is as real as Pat describes, we could find that the presidential race itself is decided in a couple of swing states, as it was in Florida in the year 2000 by Ralph Nader and in the Gore-Bush contest.
So, Pat, I want to ask you, though, I mean, obviously Jill Stein, a woman, Green Party, she kind of leans a little bit more toward Bernie Sanders. I don't know that they would necessarily take a chunk of votership out in terms of where they can get on the ballots, but what are your thoughts about it?
Well, the Green Party is on many ballots, enough to qualify for the debates, as I said. Look, the problem is they're being choked off the lack of oxygen from the media, which is determined to support Hillary Clinton and make this as narrow a choice as possible. However, if I were a good American who had a lot of money and wanted to give Americans a chance to have their voice, I would have a super PAC that would give Jill Stein a voice and let her be heard, as with the Libertarian.
We'll be right back.
And that would shake
Final thoughts. I'll go to Pat for his. Pat?
quick. I think this election is not over. I think a lot of people who have been through this who have been wrong all year will eat their words come September. Number two, I want to do a quick shout out to two of our most loyal fans in Charleston, Speedy and BB Feckle. Speedy turned 95 this week and is totally copacetic and going. And BB is their 91st birthday today, and they watch us every Sunday. Happy birthday, guys.
That's awesome. All right. Too late for Trump or not?
No, it isn't. The Clintons are nervous. They should be. They'll spend $2 billion.
Wow. John, and you know them.
As Yogi Berra would say, it's getting late early. It's not too late, but we're running out of time, and he's going to look back and realize he frittered away May, June, July, and the first half of August.
But you said it's not too late.
He should be ahead by 10 points.
Right, but you still have faith.
Yeah, there's still a chance.
Diana says, I don't think the polls are anywhere near accurate anywhere. Most Trump supporters won't answer media polls because they lie, exclamation point. Have a couple of professional pollsters here. But we're out of time, so we'll take that one next week. Right, Diana? And everybody, thanks a lot for watching. I mentioned that I was going to give these out. So redcross.org/donate. Maybe we can pop those up on the screen. SamaritansPurse.org if you want to help the people of Louisiana suffering with the flooding. That's Fox Report on this Sunday.